Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Let's get a look at month-to-date precipitation ranks by climate district, because I believe by the time we get to the end of this month, there's going to be a lot of change in this map. We're continuing to produce quite a lot of heavy rainfall here on several weak systems that run through the northern plains of the United States toward the Great Lakes states and also across parts of the Canadian prairies. So we're going to see these numbers change quite a bit. Of course, we're going to talk about Tropical Storm Ida, soon to be Hurricane Ida, that is going to come right in through this area, which means we're going to dump a lot of rain here on the lower Mississippi River Valley. Some places in through here have been drier in the last 25 days or so, but we could possibly bring in more flooding rain right to parts of Middle Tennessee, which we talked about in the last video, having flooding last weekend. And then over here in the southwest, where there is a tropical storm named Nora that's going to come up through the Baja and may eventually drop a lot of precipitation in this area as well before spreading through the Four Corners states, potentially bringing some rainfall into that area, maybe even getting some of that moisture out into the plains. So this is just kind of our baseline of where we were at this point in the month, and I think over the next 10 days or so, this is going to look a lot different. Certainly over the next week, take a look. This is what we've got from the latest European this is the European operational run, the 12Z run from today, looking at those anomalies. So you can see the wetter conditions through the prairie. You can see them here in the northern plains, really targeting this area with a lot of thunderstorm activity. I'll show you that in a few moments. But this would be the track of Tropical Storm Ida. Notice the track will likely be on the western edge of this. The heaviest rains are always on the eastern side of these hurricanes. Well, not always, but most of the time they are. And we'll have to wait and see exactly what these rainfall totals are going to look like. But we're targeting somewhere around Monday right here as a landfall. And this could be a very strong system. I'll come back to that in a second. And this is where we're expecting Nora to go through. So middle of the day today, this is the group of tropical thunderstorms that has begun to organize. They've got those wind speeds above 23 miles an hour, which is what it takes to get up to that tropical storm status, or excuse me, 39 miles an hour. It's up to 39 miles an hour, and earned it its name. And what we want to do is we want to take a quick look at the conditions out ahead of it as it comes right through the strait and eventually here into the Gulf of Mexico as to what this system could possibly turn into. What was interesting was earlier in the week there was some concern about how these two systems are going to interact. The one here, Tropical Storm Ida, and now Tropical Storm Nora, which is on this side. So this is what we're talking about. Let's go right on into it. We do have two other areas that we're watching. There's a wave that the National Hurricane Center has given a 70% chance of development, and there's also a system here that has the same 70% chance. But our focus is going to be on Ida here. So right now, winds 40 miles an hour, so just barely tropical storm strength. Let's give it a click here and take a look at where the National Hurricane Center is taking the track of this. So just a quick reminder, the cone that you see here is an historical error cone. So out a certain number of days, this is what they expect the error on the path to be. We've watched this slowly migrate a bit farther around the coast, once targeting Texas, now really coming into this area here. Now, I just want to be clear about something. I don't want to drive any hype about this. I want to just provide the information we have. But one of the issues of having a tropical system at hurricane strength coming in like this is that with the winds coming around this side, if this creeps a little bit farther to the east with time, it does kind of remind me, Katrina went in something like this. It made this turn, and as it did so, brought in those strong winds out of the east that kind of flooded Lake Pontchartrain. So I'm just starting to get concerned about where this is going to go. Now at this point, the National Hurricane Center, see how there's H's in here. This means they expect this to be a Category 1 or Category 2 strength storm at this point. If they put an M inside of this, so if you keep checking this website over the next couple of days, that would mean that they've got this at Category 3 or 4 or 5 strength. And what I want to assess here is 1, the track, and then 2, what the possibilities are of it strengthening. So why don't we kind of dig on into that. First, let's go to the 12Z European Ensemble forecast track. And as you saw, we're looking at that late Sunday, early Monday arrival here in Louisiana. Now this was the newest data we've got from the European model. And you can see it'll be there in about 4 days. That's what we're looking at here. And then once it does get inland, the possibility on this turn straight to the north going up, really up the gut of the Mississippi River is relatively high. This is pretty tight clustering of what they've got. So we got that timing down there at that Sunday night into Monday morning landfall. Now, what I'm most concerned about is what could it do when it gets into the very warm waters of the Gulf. And there's a lot of research that's been done to kind of study the strength of hurricanes. And many of you know that the potential strength is tied to ocean temperatures. So there's some work done by Dr. Kerry Emanuel, he's out of MIT, who puts together, it's relatively simplistic here, but puts together two graphics, two maps, the potential minimum central pressure and then the potential maximum wind speed. And this is almost entirely based off of ocean temperatures. So what I want you to notice is, let's look at the coloring. Coming right into this area where the ocean temperatures are plenty warm, the possibility for the pressure to drop off dramatically is high. And therefore, as you see in the color on the bottom one, the potential for this to become a major hurricane is in the works. And the other bit of evidence I have toward this is we saw, remember last week we had Grace that went across the Yucatan Peninsula, spent a very small amount of time in the Bay of Campeche, yet went from, really got knocked down to tropical depression and then jumped right back up to Category 2 strength storm before going into Mexico. So I just point this out as something I'm a bit concerned about, that I think we could get some rapid intensification as it moves toward land. Now, the other major factor, and I'm going to tell you something, there's a lot of subtleties I'm not going to cover here, but the other major factor would be wind shear. So what we look out for here is out ahead of the track of the system, so we're looking at it right here, do we see extremely high values of wind shear? So in other words, these colors and higher. Now again, we're looking at this with respect to the environment around the storm, not necessarily what the storm is creating. And so just thinking about that, this is out to tomorrow afternoon on Friday. And as we play it forward, what we see is that the environment in which this is moving is not going to have high ambient wind shear that it's going into, which means I don't anticipate there being a lot of factors impeding the development of this system. There was some concern, and several great meteorologists were discussing the position of Nora here, that if Nora's shear, which comes off of these hurricanes in a clockwise fashion, were to come over and influence what was going on with Ida, it could weaken it. But at this point, I think the two systems are going to be far enough apart that there'll be a gap in between that we may not get that same sort of shear interaction. And with the jet stream way up here, it's not as though the polar jet stream is going to have any sort of an effect on this system. So that's kind of the makeup of what we got right now. So again, what I'd like to iterate, why don't we just come back to our main site here from the National Hurricane Center. Sometime late on Sunday, early Monday is when we're looking at potential landfall here. And between now and then, please just check out nhc.noaa.gov. It is the ultimate source on what we've got here. In fact, let me upgrade this. Looks like they haven't updated their map just yet, even though they've got it labeled down here, Tropical Depression 9, even though it's Tropical Storm Ida. So I was just triple checking that this is just a little typo here. This is their 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time update. So okay, that's good. So we'll watch it carefully, and I would like for all of you to do that as well. Now from there, we've got other things going on, and if we just take a look at the satellite imagery from this afternoon, we can see just numerous complexes of thunderstorms erupting across the United States. There's a relatively weak boundary sitting right in through here. See the storms down that, and then we have those in the Appalachian Mountains. We've got some sea breeze stuff going on down south, storms blowing up in the mountains here in the Four Corner states, and as I said, multiple complexes of storms running through the northern plains, and this morning many of these were warned as severe. We'd like to show you a radar animation of that, and so you can see the storms. This is back, early this morning, rolling through here. And I want you just to take note here that many of these storms kind of took on more of a linear structure to them, where they begin to line out and we get severe and damaging winds out of this. And just thinking back over the last few days, we've had a lot of that going in parts of Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, also in parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, coming out of the Dakotas and Nebraska. It's just been a whole lot of this going on. And our concern is that right now, through the remainder of the day, this is what the Storm Prediction Center is on the outlook for today, and they've got an enhanced risk in this particular area. So why don't we go to some of our high-resolution modeling and just kind of see what the concern is. So this would be the 18Z run from the NAM model. And so it already picked up on the storm still rolling through this area this afternoon, but let's get into this evening. So this is 8 o'clock tonight Central Time, and you can see that the models are attempting to produce a pretty large Could be a bow echo or some sort of squall line here that runs right along the border of Minnesota and Iowa, and then possibly builds down into that unstable area to the south of it. And this will be in the overnight hours. So, after sunset, we'll watch this come through. Now, how long that lasts into the morning will all depend on the environment in the elevated layer, so above the boundary layer, to see if it cuts into Illinois and eventually maybe makes it farther to the east. But as we play this forward, you're just going to notice that going into tomorrow on Friday, this is how things look by Friday afternoon. Look at all the scattered convection across the south. Look at the storms coming right back here on this very weak boundary. Look at our next wave coming through parts of Montana, spreading rain through parts of the Canadian prairie. And we still have storms off here just north of the mid-Atlantic as well. So this is Friday night, and as we just play through the overnight hours and get into Saturday, you're just going to see a whole lot more of the same. I mean, this is Saturday evening. The models are once again producing lines of storms. That seems to be the most dominant mode of thunderstorm activity that we're seeing going through this section of the country. So it's a multi-day severe thunderstorm threat for that part of the U.S. I'm talking about the Midwest, Upper Midwest, Western Cornbelt, this area and through here, but a lot of scattered storms outside of that as well. And while the NAM model is not, our preferred model for modeling tropical systems, I'll just say it, boy, from a meteorological perspective, Ida looks like a buzzsaw down here. So we're going to watch it very carefully. So why don't we go from here over to the other two models we like to use a lot, and that would be a comparison between the GFS 12Z and the European 12Z. And let's just see how things shake down when we compare these two models, all right? So if we play this forward, let's get through what we've already seen. So here we're going through the day on Friday. That's Friday morning, afternoon, and evening. So again, we're going to watch those storms pop here in this area. And what we're noticing at this point is that the GFS seems to be more aggressive on the forward motion of Ida. Notice how it's right there, whereas the European's lingering a little bit. All right, and that could be important for when we have landfall. As we get into Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening, again, complexes of storms running on this weak frontal boundary here in the GFS. It's also there in the European. We have the scattered storms in the northeast as well. All along the Gulf Coast, we'll be watching for storms out ahead of Ida, and there will be storms popping in the Four Corner states as well. Now, an interesting difference at this point is that the European is more aggressive on the development of Nora. Remember talking about that a few moments ago, than the GFS is. And you'll also notice as I play through Saturday night, getting into Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon here, that the GFS is much quicker with bringing Ida over, Louisiana. So it's already there at 1 p.m. in the afternoon on Sunday. The European is slower. And in both situations, they both have a low that's moving out of Ontario, see it? And there will be scattered storms on a weak frontal boundary here all the way through the weekend. It's just the setup in this pattern, all right? Now, notice that the European, very well defined low pressure center for Nora, and it's just not there in the GFS. So as we play this forward, the European model has a 1 a.m. landfall about on Monday for Ida, with Nora hitting the Baja. And the GFS already has this onshore cutting through southern Mississippi as well. There's a lingering front right here on which we're going to see storms again in the overnight hours on Sunday into Monday morning. And it's actually going to be the position of this front that's going to help to steer Ida through the Tennessee Valley. Ready? So as we go into Monday afternoon and evening, now progressing into the overnight hours, and then Tuesday morning. So by Tuesday morning, the difference, this is where the GFS has Nora, and you can see it's enough, but it's pretty far to the south here. Whereas there's this frontal boundary right there, and it's also in the GFS, against which this is going to have to make a turn and push over toward the east, cutting through the Tennessee Valley area. So let's go through Tuesday afternoon and evening, now going out here to Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening. And both models are very clear that this is going to spread out quite a bit. Now at this point, Nora, producing precip here and extending it into the Four Corner states. And the European model has the next low with another broad front here, midweek next week, sweeping through the same area that's getting storms right now. It is actually there in the GFS, although the GFS isn't building up the storms in this area, but that same low is sitting in place here. And we can see the scattered convection over the Four Corner states. Better agreement, I think, on this spreading through the Mid-Atlantic and the Appalachian Mountains, so that would be what's left of Ida all the way out to next week. So if we just keep playing this, let's go all the way out to next Thursday morning. And this is the scenario that we see set up. So we're just going to keep this going in this area. This would be Nora. That's what's left over from Ida. And that's a lot of things to be paying attention to. And I worry as I make this video today that I'm missing something. I'm missing somebody as I discuss this. But you can kind of pause the video here and take a look at what some of these models are saying in terms of total precip. So let's just go first here and look at the European 7-day total precip map. And you can highlight those main areas. And let's compare it to the GFS. Ready? So this was the European. Here's the GFS. And I'll rock you back and forth so you can see it. European and GFS. But what's sometimes a bit more constructive as we've been doing as of late is let's just compare both models in one map. So again, as you're looking at this, just remember these colors represent where the European is wetter. These colors represent where the GFS is wetter. So take a look at Ida. The European bringing much more of that rainfall farther to the west than the GFS. But then the European continues it through Tennessee, Kentucky with heavier rainfall amounts into the Appalachian Mountains. The European more aggressive on total rainfall here and extending back into the Canadian prairie. And also, a big difference in the fact that the GFS is not projecting Nora to do like we expected. So let me take these drawings off here, and now you can have a closer look at the difference between our two main modeling sources. Now, interestingly enough, as we have been seeing, their ensembles have been doing a better job at picking up on the pattern for week 2. So let's go out there and start next Thursday, September the 2nd, and what we see here is that overall, the pattern remains moving. Let's just leave it at that. You see, if I step you back here, Thursday, Friday, into Saturday, September the 4th, all the way out to Sunday, September the 5th, we move this trough east. See that? And then we still have very strong jet stream level winds here. There's a trough in place there with a ridge to the south, so the winds have to go fast around it. And they're cutting into the northern plains and they're pulling into broader troughs that run along the U.S.-Canada border. So the net effect of that is we still see this as our week 2 precipitation pattern. Like I've been talking about now for the last, I feel like 3 or 4 weeks, we're just going to have a lot of thunderstorm activity, not just here in the Midwest, but to the Canadian prairie, back down to the southern plains, through the Mid-South, through the Ohio River Valley. And very interestingly enough, the models, even though we're going right toward the peak in hurricane season, at this point, the ensembles are not finding features here in the Gulf or in the part of the Western Atlantic at this point. But we always have to put a big question mark on this because we know how quickly things can evolve. So I wouldn't take what you see here in the Gulf or the Western Atlantic, too seriously. I think there could be some change in that area. But we've now been very consistent with the stormy pattern here. Let's go from there and look out longer term. This is data that was just released. Now this is the time period of September the 9th through October the 8th. That's a 30-day time period, September 9th through October the 8th. And we've been discussing how the models continue to want to keep a lot of thunderstorm activity in the midsection of the country. An interesting trend has been the drier conditions we've seen develop in the model here as higher atmospheric pressure starts to build in, and the models are not seeing major tropical cyclones there, but they're not designed to do that out at this time period. So don't assume much about tropical cyclone activity in these monthly forecasts. It's not possible for this to do this. But it is a bit of a shift where we're maybe possibly pushing more higher pressure farther and farther to the west, occupying much of this area. So given that we're going to get some heavy rain very soon from Ida in this area, this could be an important drier trend as they start working on harvest in this particular spot. From there, let's get this discussion over to temperatures, and I want to show you the all hazards weather map. Much of what you see here stretching into Wyoming and then eventually here into Wisconsin and this part of Minnesota, this is all air quality issues. But here, these are all heat advisories, and we have heat advisories in the Northeast as well. And there seems to be this divide where the colder air is and where the much hotter air is to the south. To take a look at those temperatures, let's blow this up so we can see a little bit better. There we go. Here was Thursday's highs. Let's now plug on through to Friday's highs. Still another scorcher, very hot and humid air in place here. And if we go from Friday into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, we can now start to see the influence of the tropical system over the south. But we do go back up to our more normal, even a slight warm bias in the west, and we still keep the heat on in the mid-Atlantic here on Monday. Progressing forward, though, into Tuesday and Wednesday, that's where we're going to see that cloud cover stretching on off toward like Tennessee and Ohio Valley and the cooler conditions we expect there. But overall, when we just kind of stitch this all together, let's look out there at day 5 through 10. And out at that time period, this is going to be the area that we're going to watch very carefully for some cooler weather. Now, just as a reminder, as we get into the month of September, by mid-September, it is not uncommon to start to see frost events happening here. So I'll start talking about that once we get into next week and have a better discussion about what maybe the potential would be for an early frost in this area. But we're going to stay, generally speaking, in this part of the country anywhere between 3 and 10 degrees above average. But we'll have some brief interludes of some cooler weather. Out to day 10 through 15, this is the latest from the GFS looking out that far. Again, our cooler bias is tucked away here to the north, but there will be some cooler air that does pass into the eastern part of the United States at that time period as well. Longer term temperatures, again, the brand new European weeklies that were just released, we continue to favor cooler than normal temperatures here, but several interludes here of warmer weather pushing through the Ohio Valley toward the northeast, and the west does have ridging that does reappear throughout the month of September into early October, favoring the warmer temperatures. But we're going to keep a close eye on this area, and we'll be talking more about what potentially could be frost just showing up there relatively soon. Now, beyond this, what's some of the guidance in the long range? Let's just do a quick bit of science on this. I want to show you that what the European model is currently thinking is going to happen here with the MJO. So I confess last time, I really thought it was going to jump out here in phase 4, 5, maybe even 6 pretty quickly. It instead collapsed, and now the model's trying over the next 45 days to do the same thing. Let's just take this at face value and suggest that the MJO stays over the Indian Ocean or over Australia, or north of it. The point is that leaves a lot of subsidence in the Pacific. And if that's the case, and we do keep the MJO in this area, what that means is we're not necessarily going to be putting a lot of upper level subsidence over the Atlantic. So my point here is to say that I think that the tropical cyclone activity is just going to continue as we approach the peak in hurricane season and then the remainder of September. There's another part to this as well, and it has to do with vertical and zonal integral of angular momentum. All right. The values have been dropping off, and I want to point out where they've been dropping off. We've seen it right here around 30 degrees north. We've seen it just south of the equator as well. But this is an area that we've now started to see some of the winds slacken. But a lot of this is happening over in Europe, where this big cutoff low and this omega block is starting to set up right now, which means the North Pacific, I think, is going to continue to stay open and moving, which means routine weather systems coming through, basically running along the U.S.-Canada border. That's the interpretation you've got here. And the last couple things I'd like to bring up here is let's just take a quick inventory on what's going on with our La Nina. So our trade winds, we still have some stronger trade winds in this area, and we do see some cooler water emerging. But we need to watch this carefully in October. That could be one of our more dominant fall patterns, which could lead to more favorable harvest weather in the midsection of the country, which, I mean, drier at that point. But the other wild card is going to be what's going on in South America. Now, we have had, and let's just go take a look at a 10-day forecast, we have had a lot of drought development during the dry season in southern Brazil. But as of late, coming out of Argentina and then getting into southern Brazil, there have been a few time periods of some heavier rainfall. Not completely corrective on the drought, but there's been some rain coming in. What I'm going to watch carefully over the next, well, honestly, over the next 2.5 months is the arrival of rainfall here in the north. This would be Mato Grosso do Sul, Mato Grosso. Those are going to be our areas that plant very, very quickly. So we'll keep an update on this, and we're going to start releasing South America only videos once we get into the month of September, so we can watch that together and see how this might influence global markets. All right. So we'll stop it there. Appreciate your attention today, and I will talk to you again on Monday. Thank you.